Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for the Ensigns of Command, which is episode 2 of season 3 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, one episode at a time. In this video I cover the episode Ensigns of Command. So the Ensigns of Command is the episode in which the Enterprise is contacted by this mysterious race, the Shellak, which haven't made contact with the Federation in 118 years. They have a treaty, and apparently in that treaty, one of the planets that was deemed theirs and that they wish to colonize has a human infestation on it that they want the Enterprise to remove. Now, the Shellak treat humans as the way human beings would treat ants. They think of them as a lesser life form. However, they had this treaty that keeps the peace, and so the planet is hostile to human life. Somehow these human beings survived in it for 90 years, and so they send down data to evacuate this colony of nearly 1,500 people. However, the colony is led by a man named Grosjevan, who's very stubborn, who doesn't want to leave the colony behind, and so he convinces everyone not to leave, and Data is then tasked with trying to convince them that they are all going to die if they don't leave, and he gets the help from a local woman who becomes a bit infatuated with him. So with her help, he eventually is able to convince the people of the colony that they need to evacuate. Meanwhile, the Shellak are attempting to colonize the planet within 3 days, and Picard needs at least 3 weeks in order to evacuate everyone safely. And every attempt he has made to try to get a delay was met with, resistance, as the Shellak continue to use the treaty to say that it isn't in the treaty that he can have this extra time. But Picard eventually finds a loophole in the treaty that lets him get the 3 weeks he deserves, and he pleasures in finally using the treaty to get back at the Shellak. And so they get the time that they need in order to evacuate everyone. So this is a pretty decent episode. I think I do like this episode. I think it doesn't really live up to its full potential, though, is what I would say. And I think there's a few things in the plot that don't quite work for me, particularly when it comes to the Data storyline. Now, I think this is a very good episode for Data, a very good exploration of Data's character, but I think it could have been better. Particularly his relationship, which seemed a bit, I guess I would say, unexplored and a bit strange, where she just kind of just pops up out of nowhere and offers her help to Data, and seems sort of fascinated with the fact that he's an android, from coming from a society that is less advanced than the Federation. And so her interest in Data is kind of at first portrayed as a sort of scientific or professional interest, but then she just kisses him out of nowhere. And I suppose they did develop a little bit of relationship, but I think this could have been better. I think that they could have focused on this more to, sell this relationship more, and I think that they should have went on to a full relationship. Adrienne McKenzie, I think her name was. I think you just called her Mackenzie. But anyway, so apparently the original script was written to have have Data and Mackenzie sort of hook up, have a sort of a sex scene. I suppose probably took place off screen, as most sex scenes in Star Trek do, but it was going to imply that, and it was going to have it was going to play on their relationship more, and it was also going to play more on Data sort of learning to deal with human beings. So this script was originally written by Melinda Snodgrass, who also wrote Measure of the Man, so seems to be interested in Data. And she has quoted as saying that her original intention was to have a story where Data found himself in a situation where logic would not solve the situation, and so he had to sort of become more human or rely more on human instincts in order to resolve the situation. And we do get a little bit of that in the story, because he just he gives his logic rationale to the colonists, which is the most straightforward logic you could ever have, where, hey, if you do not leave, you will die. And yet that doesn't work. And so he has to innovate and come up with different ways. At first he tries reverse psychology, but that doesn't really work. And so then he has to try just shooting a bunch of people and destroying shit to make his point, which does work. So in a way, that original intention does come off in the episode, that Data finds himself in the situation where people are being irrational and logic will not solve the day. But yeah, I think so. All right, something I was reading in the book of interviews that I have was that apparently there was a lot of scripts, particularly in season 3. There was piles and piles and piles of scripts because they were taking submissions from everyone. Although when this episode was written, that might have not have been the case yet, because it was in the early days of season 3 when Michael Wagner was still there. But I'm sure Michael Piller had his pass at the script before it went to production. But anyway, apparently there were scripts, piles and piles and piles of scripts lying around, and someone once described that there was a whole entire stack of pitches or scripts just about Data falling in love. Apparently, that was one of the favorite things that people loved to pitch. However, it was something that Roddenberry was and I think maybe even Rick Berman was very hesitant to do. They didn't really want to do a Data falling in love story, which they eventually did do an episode all about him getting a girlfriend in the 4th season episode In Theory, which I think is a good episode in theory. Get it? Not in execution. But I'll get to that episode when I get to that episode and what's wrong with it. I actually think this is a better episode that deals with Data's romance, and yet it doesn't really. I think it should have delved really more deeply into Data encountering a romance rather than him just kissing her because she kissed him first and saying, oh, it appeared you needed it. And not really having any significance. And, you get the impression that Data left an impression on her, the way she says bye to him. But I really didn't like it that he didn't say goodbye to her. I mean, he knows how to say goodbye. He knows the human custom of saying goodbye. And so he said no sort of farewell. He just unceremoniously kissed her and then unceremoniously got in the shuttle and fucked off, which I don't like. I think that could have been handled better. So I didn't read the original script, which apparently is online. You could read it, but I have an idea that they handled this better. Now, part of the reason apparently of why the storyline between her and Data was cut back actually had to do with budget concerns. Because I was thinking, was this because I know Michael Piller was the one in charge? Did he rewrite it to make it worse? That doesn't sound like him. That's not all the praise I've been heaping on him for making season 3 so much better. But apparently, I mean, he might have had a hand in making it lesser, but or maybe it was Rick Berman and Gene Roddenberry with their notes trying to prevent Data from having a romance. But ultimately, they said it was actually a budget reason, that they went over budget and they had to cut the episode short because they were like $20,000 over budget or something. And so apparently all the scenes I think even the sex scene, they said, that expanded upon this romance more got cut, and maybe that's why the romance seems a bit choppy to me, because maybe we're missing some key scenes. But of course, if they did have a fling, they actually did do the deed, as they say, then that makes Data's refusal to even acknowledge her and say goodbye when he leaves even more asshole-ish. I mean, come on, Data. Don't be an asshole. Yeah, so I think that storyline had the potential to be way better than in theory, because I think the concept of Data just, having a romance with someone on the ship is not as interesting as him having a romance with a random stranger at a colony that he'll never see again. And I think they could have done more with that, especially since they were, partners trying to solve the situation of saving the colony from the idiot who wanted to get them all killed. So that leads me to Goin, who apparently, and I had no idea until just recently, the actors' lines were all dubbed by another actor. Now, there's no real, clear answer as to why this happened. And then the actor also asked that they remove his name from the credits. He didn't want his name listed in this episode. And again, there's no real clear answer to that. But there's a quote from the director of the episode saying that the original actor sounded too much like John Wayne. And so that's why they overdubbed him with another actor. And then my guess would be that the actor had his name removed because they dubbed all of his dialogue and he wasn't happy with that and so didn't want his name on it. But that's just my guess. I mean, that makes sense to me. So, yeah, some other people guessed that maybe the guy wanted his name removed, so that's why they dubbed him, but I think it's the other way around. That would make more sense to me. But anywho, I didn't even notice this. I watched some other reviews and other opinions of the episode where they point out, oh, they're dubbing this actor. Why they dubbed this actor? This dubbing sounds so dumb. Hey, maybe I'm not the sharpest knife in the tool shed, but I didn't notice that. I've been watching this episode off and on for decades, and I never noticed that this was, because I don't know what the original actor sounds like. So I don't know that. I don't know that's not his voice. And so I think the dubbing was done well because I didn't even notice. And I watched it again, even knowing it's dubbed, and it's still not painfully obvious to me. It's not like a Godzilla situation, like, oh, look, there's Godzilla. So at least the dubbing was done well, and it's hard for me to imagine. I tried to picture in my head, what it would sound like with more of a John Wayne, hi, Pilgrim. I can't imagine what it would sound like with a more of a John Wayne type voice. But maybe he didn't really sound like John Wayne, because sometimes directors say shit that you don't really see. I don't see it. But I think if I heard the episode with the original voice from the actor, it would probably sound very strange to me, and it would be like, whoa. So I'm just used to this dubbing. I didn't even notice it was dubbing. But anyway, getting in more to the story part with Goin, I hate this character, and this character really annoys me. And I would really, really like to say that it is unrealistic, and no leadership in that sort of leadership position would be that stupid. And not only is he that stupid, but vast majority of people follow him being that stupid. I wish I could say that, but if I really look at it compared to what's happening in real life, that unfortunately is realistic. And I'm not just talking about modern day, Trumpism is definitely a good example, particularly when people follow someone who is clearly an idiot and doesn't know what he's doing. But also, even going back a bit further, you can look at vaccine deniers, climate change deniers, and all these other situations that make it clear that, yeah, this actually, unfortunately, is quite realistic. Human beings can be really stupid. But it's just frustrating, though, you know? I find those, like, I don't even watch any of the news. I try to avoid the news about Trump or Trump supporters because it just frustrates me too much. I don't want to deal with that kind of stupidity, or especially like climate change deniers. That's something I used to argue with, but it's actually entirely pointless to argue with someone who is immune to facts and reality. So there's no point. So having to deal with that is really frustrating. So having to watch the show where I'm presented with this character who is being beyond idiotic and obtuse is really frustrating to deal with. Now, I've heard the opinion that you can kind of understand where he's coming from, and I can. And that's partly what makes him realistic, is you can understand that they created this colony against great odds. They've been living there in their entire lives. They're like the third generation. They're ancestors. Not even ancestors, just grandfather or whatever. Sacrificed so much to build that colony, and some robot comes up out of nowhere and just all of a sudden it's like, okay, you gotta go. And I understand why they would be resistant to that, but the thing is that they're presented with a clear situation that your choices, that there's no way around it. Like, we wish this situation was something different, but it's not. The clear situation is you got two choices. You can die or you can leave. And so in that case, however understandable their original resistance to leaving is, yeah, they're being idiotic for wanting to just kill like 15,000 people, including young children who will never have a chance to grow up, just because they're too fucking stubborn to leave a place. And it is beyond idiotic. Now, to be fair, I think Data could have argued his point better, which I'll get to later. But it was still like incredible. As I said, unfortunately, not unrealistic. I would like to think it would be unrealistic, but the fact of the matter is, unfortunately, it's not. But it's so frustrating to watch this idiot be like, strong arm everyone and be like, we're not leaving. My grandfather was buried on the mountain. Who gives a fuck about your damn grandfather? Anyway, but the thing is that I think Picard is being a bit obtuse in this episode too, because Picard and Riker seem to have this attitude of, oh yeah, prepare the people for evacuation. They don't seem to take into account that these people have been living there for 90 years, or at least their ancestors or family have been, and that they might not be willing to just pick up and leave just on one android say so. So I think Riker and Picard were being a bit obtuse. And at one point when Data tries to explain the situation to Riker, Riker's just like, I don't want to hear about it. Just prepare these people for evacuation and you deal with it. Which I think is actually a bad move for Commander Riker. I mean, he should realize, especially Data is not really equipped with having how to deal with human beings and how to convince them of something, and so Riker could at the very least help them. It's not like he was doing anything else. He wasn't really that busy. I think he should have gave Data some advice and shit, and really talked to him more of a level and got the detail and maybe had worked with him a bit on what they could do. I think he was just taking the threat on seriously. He was just like, oh yeah, whatever, what the fuck, just tell them to evacuate, you get over it. And that's actually really stupid. I think that was bad commandering on Riker's part. So when I said that Data could have been more convincing, and that's another sort of nitpick I have with this episode, is that after he shows everyone, actions speak louder than words, so he warns them ahead of time, and I like this. He's like, I'm going to attack the aqueduct. And, he told Mackenzie to tell Goshevin this, and she's like, well, they'll prepare for you, and he's like, I certainly hope so. and he knew that he'd be able to take them down very easily, which he does, and then he destroys the aqueduct, and then he tells the whole crowd that this one weapon I have is I'm just one person with one phaser, and the weapons that the Shellak have are way superior to this one weapon, and they can just wipe you out from orbit, and you will die never seeing the face of your attackers. So here's a question I have. Just forgive my naiveness, my ignorance, but Data, why the hell did you not tell the people that earlier? It seems like that is something you should have led with, rather than, oh, the Shellak are coming to fight, to kill you. It seems like one of the most first follow-up to that, and the first retort to, like, Goshevin saying, oh, we'll fight them. The very first thing Data should have said was, they're going to wipe you out from orbit. Their weapons are vastly superior. You're not even going to see their face. There will be no fight. They're just going to show up from orbit and go, and in 1 second you'll be just sitting there minding your own business, and the next second your entire colony of 15,000 people will be dead. I'm sorry, Data, but you should have led with that. And so I find it a bit plot contrivance that he didn't. That he wasn't more convincing. He wasn't more specific of how hopeless their situation was. Because I think that's a vital piece of information. Now, granted, with how dumb and stubborn that Goshevin is, maybe he still would have been resistant to that, but most of the colonists, I don't think so. Like, and even in his whole, like, reverse psychology rant about, yes, your children would have died, for brave cause or whatever, he should have mentioned the fact that that the situation was hopeless and that they were going to wipe him out from orbit. Now, I do get that the physical demonstration of actually seeing the phaser in action is more convincing, but I mean, it's not it wouldn't hurt to actually say these things to begin with, and maybe if some people still weren't convinced, then you could show up and phaser their asses. But still, I think he should have led with the fact that he never mentioned it. He never mentioned that the Shellak were just going to wipe them out from orbit easily, and they would never. See, they're all under the impression we're going to stay and fight, and that's what Data was saying. I'm like, Data, why don't you tell them there will be no fight? I mean, even if they don't believe you, I think enough people would, or it's at least worth a try to just maybe mention that. Maybe, I'm just, that's just me, I'm just saying. But anyway, so unfortunately I do find a little bit of this plot a little contrived, a little like it doesn't need to be there. Like, the only reason why he didn't mention this earlier is so the episode could happen, and the only reason why Goshevin is being a colossal moron and the colony is going along with his being a colossal moron is so that the episode could happen. And so, yeah, I think there's ways to handle this that would have been more interesting. Like when they brought out that other guy, the other dude who also had some supporters but not as much as Goshevin. Like, I bet you if you mentioned to him that the Shellak were going to wipe out everyone without even having a fight, I bet you he would believe you, and he would have enough support to overrule Goshevin when people heard that. But I mean, even you look at when Data like points to the children, it's like, your children will die. You can tell the mothers are like, what? Who are you talking about my kid dying? Like, and so I think that should have been convincing enough to some people, especially if he bothered to give the detail about how hopeless it was, which he kind of forgot to really get into details about that, which is contrived a little bit. But anyway, yeah. So ultimately, yeah, I think this storyline with Data is a good idea, and there's some good things in there, but it could have been done better. particularly the romance with him and Mackenzie. I like the snippets of what we get. I just wish we got more and that they focus more on that. But now, let me get to the Picard storyline, which I actually liked a lot better. I like the Shellak were a very interesting adversary, and I was a bit disappointed that we never saw them again. They never brought the Shellak back. I think modern Trek could still have a chance to bring them back. The Picard talked about how the treaty that they're referencing was first signed like 110 years ago or something like that. So that puts it right around Strange New Worlds time, I believe. I didn't look this up, so maybe I'm off a bit, but maybe Strange New Worlds could do an episode when he first met the Shellak. I'm just saying, not saying, I'm just saying. Anyway, so I like the Shellak storyline. I like the fact that they would, use this treaty and they would, hang up, he would be, Picard would be mid-sentence and the Shellak would just cut him off. And when Picard, and Troy actually beamed over to the Shellak ship, they cut him off mid-sentence, just beamed him back to the Enterprise. They're just like, conversation is weak and pointless. You don't talk, you jabber. Like that kind of stuff was cool. I really liked it. And also, I'm noticing already from the first episode that was actually written for season 3, the improvement in the writing for Picard and characters like Picard and Troy, and even Riker, all these characters are written It's funny because I watched a review of this episode that referred to it as a soft reboot of that, or season 3 as a whole as a soft reboot of the show, which I don't know if I'd go that far. It was definitely, I talked about in my review for Evolution how the change between season 2 and 3 was night and day. It felt like season 3 was filmed 10 years after season 2, but I don't know if I'd go as far as to say it was a soft reboot, but I can tell already how they instantly improved Picard's character. If you go back and watch seasons 1 and 2, you see that Picard was not written as well. He's more grumpy. He's not as good as the captain. And in later seasons, he's much better. But one thing I didn't fully realize is that change was instant. It wasn't a gradual change that they slowly did over 7 seasons. It instantly happened from season 2 to season 3. Now, granted, they did slowly advance his character throughout the first 2 seasons, where by the end of the second season, he wasn't as big of an asshole as he was in the first episode of the show, but he was still that sort of had that grumpy demeanor, especially in the episode Samaritan Snare, where he was being such a huge dick to everyone when he had to have that heart surgery or whatever, and you couldn't imagine season 3 through 7 Picard acting that way. And that's because they did kind of instantly change his character. And you can see that in this episode, that he's a much more likable character, someone that you really want to root for. Now, another thing I heard is that Patrick Stewart was thinking about leaving the show at the end of season 3, and throughout season 3, one of his biggest complaints is that he wasn't getting enough to do. That the show wasn't focusing on Picard too much. I've heard other people agree with that assessment. I do not. I don't agree with that assessment. You watch episodes like this, where Picard shines, or the next episode to air, Survivors, where Picard really shines. Now, neither episode is a Picard-centric episode. This, no doubt, would be most classified as a Data-centric episode, and Survivors is more of an ensemble. And also, of course, he shines in Yesterday's Enterprise, which also is a bit more of an ensemble. But Picard's awesome. He might not be the main focus, and I actually like that the show is more of an ensemble. If you compare it to the original series, which maybe he was been doing, Kirk was always the central focus of almost every episode, and maybe that's what he was complaining about. But I'm very glad that's not the case with TNG. In fact, I talked about this when I was reviewing the original series, because I heard one person say the difference between the original series and Next Gen is that the original series focused mainly on the big 3, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and that Next Gen and the later Star Trek spin-offs was more of an ensemble. And they said that as if was a bad thing for TNG to be an ensemble, which I fully don't understand. That reason right there is why I think Next Generation is far superior to the original series. I love the fact that it's more an ensemble, and I think that's one of the biggest things I don't like about the original series is that it focused too much on Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, not enough on the other characters. And that annoys me. Maybe I'm just used to this ensemble way, but I think the ensemble way is way better. And I think Picard was definitely the most featured, the most focused on character in season 3. So I don't agree with Sir Patrick Stewart that I think he was just wanting to be more like Kirk and wanting to be the entire focus of the show. But I'm glad that he wasn't. I'm glad that we got more of an ensemble. But he does shine in this episode. That was my main point. Particularly the ending scene, which is my favorite scene of the episode. It's actually an amazing scene that I love. It's one of my favorite Picard scenes, period. Where he finds the loophole in the treaty. He's like, and I like how he finally figured it out, like, we need to study this treaty. Because, the Shellak have been beating us over the head with this treaty for 3 days. It's about time we find something in it that we can use to our advantage. And I didn't like Worf's grumbling. It was like, he said something like, this is intolerable. We should just fight them or whatever, which is so Worf-like. But anyway, and I love how Picard saw something there, and he was like, that's it. And Troy and everyone else didn't see it. And this shows how awesome Picard is at negotiating, at talking people down, at exploiting loopholes and stuff like that. And Troy didn't even see it. And the Picard just get me the Shellak, and lays it down and is like, subjection to section A part 2 fluent, therefore henceforth. And I love his legalese talk. And then saying that they can have, he can request third-party mediation, and he requests that the mediators be the Grizzlies, who will be hibernating for 6 months. It's fucking genius. And how the Shellak's like, wait, we can negotiate. And when the Shellak is, this is intolerable, he's like, okay. Well, I hereby call this treaty in abeyance, and then cuts them off the same way that the Shellak have been cutting them off the entire time. And then Riker turning to Picard and saying, "You enjoyed that." He's like, "You're damn right, number one." That was such an amazing moment. And then when the Shellak called back, you can hear the beeping. And they kind of ignore that until Worf finally is like, sir, they're, Shellak are hailing. And then Picard just casually gets up, walks over to the plaque on the wall and dusts it. And, and then Worf's like, sir? And I Picard just shoots him a look. He, again, very slowly, very casually walks back to his chair and is like, okay, put him on screen. Oh, that is fucking amazing. And it was so satisfying, too, as a viewer. And I was telling myself, because throughout the episode, it was really annoying seeing how big of a dicks that the Shellak were being to Picard and the crew. But I was telling myself as I was watching, it's like, don't worry. You know that Picard's going to get them back. And he does, and it was so gratifying. It was so gratifying. Such a great use of Picard. And then you have the C story where Riker and Picard task Geordi and O'Brien and Wesley with finding a way to transport through the interference. And this was kind of, I don't think, this was kind of filler. It wasn't vital to the plot. Maybe it could have gone so that they could have focused more on Data with Mackenzie. But I did like the first scene where Riker calls in Geordi and O'Brien, and he says, so, gentlemen, we have a task for you, and the one thing we do not want to hear is that it's impossible. And then he said, we want you to find a way to transport through the interference. And the first thing Geordi says, yeah, but that's in... And he stops himself. I thought that was funny. And then, but then later to just make a joke about how And it becomes a bit silly when Picard comes in and checks on the progress, and he's like, "How's it going?" And Geordi's like, "Just as you would expect." He's like, "Good, very good, carry on," and walks out. But it's very clear that what Geordi means by "just how you would expect" is going like shit. We're not making any progress whatsoever. And Picard is kind of oblivious to that when he goes, "Very good, carry on," whatever. And then Geordi just shows up at the bridge at the end of the episode. I think it's after Picard strong armed the Shellak and got the upper hand with him. And he just shows up and is like, "Captain, we can do it. We can beam through the interference. It's going to take a team of 100 scientists and 15 years, but we can do it." Which, come on, Geordi. I know that scene is there just for comic relief, but that's a very deceptive way of phrasing it. Saying that, yeah, we can do it. It's just going to take us 15 years and a group of 100 scientists working around the clock. Yeah, that's stupid. But how come Data could get his phaser working within 3 seconds, but yet it was going to take them 15 years to get the transporters working? I know transporters are more complicated than phasers, but still, I don't know. It seems like maybe if Data were involved, it would have gone faster. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. Anyway, I would like to thank all those that support me on Patreon. Is very much appreciated. It does help me continue with the channel. I'm very humbled, very thankful for everyone's support. It does is very much appreciated. So I'll just give a quick shout out to Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Manny Jester, Joe Lavals, Alessandro Miguelisio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Neil Howes. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. Alright, so we have a few Patreon comments for this episode. First comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, "I always loved this episode. Troy was actually used right. And how did Worf survive on the Enterprise for so long, as all he wanted to do was fight? He would get his wish on Deep Space Nine 7 years later." Data becomes the Terminator in the last act as he terminates the pumping station. Geordi should have got relationship advice from Data. Ooh, that is a sick burn for Geordi. Anyway, even Wesley did better than Geordi. Oh my god, poor Geordi. My rating is 9th paragraph of subsection 10. 2 and 2, 9th paragraph, subsection 10. Anyway, yeah, Picard's pretty awesome. Yeah, poor Geordi. Worf is like, "Why are we having to read this? I just want to attack him." That is, sometimes they do overdo it with Worf. That is very true. I don't know if it's fair to call Data the Terminator. I mean, because those guys were pretty, let's see, not trained, I think would be the polite way to put it. They were chumps. So it was kind of easy for Data to take them out. But anywho. Next comment is from Ricky, who says, "This is a strong episode. I really like this one. I especially like Data's story and involvement in this episode. I really like that after everything he did to try to warn the villagers to evacuate, Data demonstrates his phaser on the people and told them that this was nothing compared to what the other alien race would do to them. And I especially liked the Picard stuff with the final resolution and how he got the upper hand of the prick of an alien ship." So a strong episode in my opinion. So my rating is an 8 out of 10. Yeah, but why didn't Data just tell them that the Shellak were going to wipe them out from orbit and they would never see the faces of their attackers? He should have led with that. I'm sorry, I still say that. But, to be fair, the phasers did speak louder than words. But He still should have said that. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Nealhouse. He says, the Shellak are interesting. The colonists on Tau Cygna 5 much less so. Data has plot armor, so only he can resist the moronic radiation or whatever the fuck it's called. And talking of moronic, may I present the colony's elected leader, Goin, who won't allow the other colonists to vote on whether or not to leave the planet. The less said about the romance between Adrian and Data, the better. Apparently, this plot thread was meant to be extended, but the budget for this episode was cut. 4 Picards out negotiating the Shellak out of 10. See, I think the episode would have been better if they expanded upon Data and Adrian. I was referring to her from Mackenzie. I can't remember what they called her in the episode. But anyway, I think if they expanded upon that, if we got more scenes with them, I think it would have been a better episode. And as for Goin not allowing people to vote, I get the impression that he was a bit of a dictator, or at least that he strong-armed and intimidated his colonists into following him, and that even if there was a vote, he would there would be voter intimidation. He would have his supporters dressed up and make Tau Cygna 5 great again hats with guns standing outside the voting booths and intimidating them into voting to stay. Anyway, that's just my guess. Anyway, next comment. Sorry to get political, but I'm sorry. I can't hide my Trump hate sometimes and just deal with it. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, as interesting as the Data story was, he was definitely outshone by Picard and his diplomacy skills back up on the ship. This is probably the episode that finally placed Picard as the captain I preferred over Kirk. 8 additional minutes to keep the Shellak waiting for a response from him out of 10. Yeah, I think, I don't know, because I wasn't of the opportunity of watching the original series first and then years later watching Next Generation. I suppose most people alive today probably weren't, just the older people. I started watching them all at the same time and all out of order for both shows, so I never really... I suppose I started with the movies, so I was bigger on Kirk at first, maybe? But I watched it all out of order, so it's hard to pinpoint when I started liking Picard more than Kirk. But if I were to put myself in the shoes of someone who watched in order, I think the episode The Survivors, which is the next episode after this one, would be where that's really the episode that made me love Picard, because he was like, Picard is the man in that episode. He was totally had his shit figured out and unraveled the mystery like a badass. But maybe it's a combination of these two episodes, like this episode and the fact that The Survivors is the very next episode and both of them portray Picard as a badass. As a combination, I think that, they prove that he's better than Kirk. But that's just my opinion. Anyway, thanks so much for your comments. So my rating for the Ensigns of Command out of 10 is going to be a 7. Very good. At one point when I was thinking about how great the Picard scene was at the end where he got the better of the Shellak, I wanted to give this episode an 8. At another stage when I was thinking about how much better the Data romance could have been and how Goin's character was very annoying, I wanted to give it a 6. But no, I think I'm sticking with the 7. I think that is the best rating for me that describes this episode, because I think this was a very interesting episode. It was a fun watch. What we did get with Mackenzie and Data was actually interesting, and it was interesting to see Data having to deal with these irrational, illogical people, and I think he handled himself well ultimately in the end. And yeah, the stuff with Picard, dealing with the Shellak and finally getting the better of them, was so goddamn satisfying. But yeah, I do think that it could have been better. I think they could have handled some of the data stuff on the planet better. But still a good episode. Still an enjoyable episode. So that is it for my review of the Ensigns of Command. So coming up next on my channel, next Monday, New Year's Day, will be my top 10 favorite shows of 2023. The video I do once a year where I rank all the shows that I've seen, or rank my 10 favorite out of all the shows that I saw in 2023. Of course, I saw a lot less shows in 2023, so I have a lot less to pull from, but still going to keep with the tradition and do my top 10 shows of 2023. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be over on Patreon for a revisited for The Survivors, one of my favorite episodes of Next Generation, I think one of the most underrated episodes of Next Gen. I already did a review for that, but over on Patreon I will revisit my review for that and give some more thoughts on the episode. And then on Thursday, staying on Patreon for another revisited, this time for Who Watches the Watchers. One of the first reviews I ever did, so I'm going to be revisiting that review and giving my updated thoughts on that episode. And then on next Saturday, I will be back on my channel with a new public video for everyone to see with my review for The Bonding. So that's what will be coming up on my channel, so be sure to check it out as I cover many more Star Trek videos and many other videos on many other shows. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.